Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Natalia. If you're new here, I'm a fashion designer and I do sewing and drawing tutorials and anything kind of under the fashion design umbrella on this channel. So if you're interested, please subscribe. Today I'm going to show you how to make a bias cut dress. It's only 3 pattern pieces, so it's pretty easy. It is cut on the diagonal. The reason why we're cutting it on the bias is because it allows for more stretch and it's just a nicer drape and it fits the figure better. I have 2.5 yards of this nice kind of drapey fabric. It's lightweight, it's has like a silky type feel. It's not silk, but I feel like that would be a good descriptor for it. And then I have a very lightweight lining that's kind of sheer. And we're gonna cut the dress out. Step 1, iron and cut the fabric. Before I get started, I am ironing my fabric. It has this really big crease in it, so I just wanna make sure that that's gone before I cut it out. It just makes it more presentable. Basically what I'm doing is making a triangle. So I'm taking this edge and this will be straight and this will be the triangle, and this line here, this is the bias. Now that I have my triangle, I'm actually going to rotate it because I don't have enough room on the table. I'm making sure the pieces are on the bias grain so you can see that arrow that shows what the grain line is, and I'm just making sure that everything's on the bias. I'm cutting out the lining pieces and now I'm cutting out the body pieces, like the self fabric pieces. Step 2, gather the bust pieces. I sewed 2 rows at a 5 stitch length and then I just gathered the pieces with my hands. Step 3, pin the bust pieces to the body and baste. So I am just pinning, I start at the edge to the edge and then I, pin in the middle and then I baste it. I'm basting it because this fabric is slinky and, kind of slippery. Step 4, sew the bust pieces to the body. So now I'm going to sew these pieces at a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That's what it looks like. That's what it looks like on the dress form. And now I'm just pressing the seam allowance down. Step 5, place the front and back pieces right side to right side and then sew the shoulders and side seams at 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I am just, it's pretty straightforward, just sewing those pieces together at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Step 6, press side seams to the back and then press the shoulder seams open flat. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Why am I pressing it to the back? Because it lays better. So just take your iron and then press it and then press the seams on the shoulder open. Step 7, place lining on the dress right side to right side and then pin the neckline. So I'm putting the lining on the dress, as you can see, right side to right side, and I kind of have to, pull it inside out just so I can get all around the neckline. And I'm just pinning it, it looks good. And then I am just basting the neckline. And then I'm going to sew the neckline at 1/2 inch seam allowance all around. The reason why I'm basting it is because, like I said, this fabric likes to shift and it's kind of silky, so it's just easier to baste, which means, sew by hand in a contrast color thread. Instead of removing all these pins while you're going. It's just easier. So the part where the bust pieces connect is a little bit tricky, so I just like to go over that one more time, and I snipped that corner so it's not bulky. And then, yeah. Hello, we're back. It's a new day. Here is where we left off with the dress. I had basted this lining onto the neckline, and then I sewed it at 1/2 inch. I am also gonna press the lining because right now it's unpressed. And then I will work on the armholes last. The lining also stretched a little bit, but that's okay. I can always trim the lining. It's not a big deal. This fabric is cut on the bias, so I'm not surprised that it stretched a little bit. Yeah, so the next course of action will be to press the lining, and I will probably do, what's it called? An understitch, but it's basically you sew the seam allowance to the lining so it just like rolls better. I'm gonna have to edit this clip a lot because I'm experiencing a little bit of lack of caffeine. Step 9, press the seam allowance towards the lining, then understitch. Understitching is stitching the lining or the facing to its seam allowance. So like I said, this just makes everything lay way better. You don't want to have the lining peeking out because it just looks bad. So that's why we're taking the time to press the seams and then just sewing right at the edge, and it looks like that. Very beautiful. This is the dress so far. As you can see, we edge stitched the lining to the seam allowance. The reason I did that is because it helps the dress lay better. Since there's 3 layers of fabric stitched together, it helps the lining stay in place, and you won't see it rolling out, and you won't see it showing on the front of the dress. Because if you don't have it pressed and you don't do the lining, sometimes the lining will just peek out and it looks really unprofessional and it just looks bad. So that's the reason why we did it. It's an extra step, but it is worth it. Step 10, pin the seam allowance of the armhole right side to right side. So the next thing that we're going to tackle is the armholes. We're going to flip the dress inside out and pin right side to right side. Okay. When I mean right side to right side, I just mean like the face fabric to the face fabric. Okay, we're going to work on the armholes. I went ahead and almost completed one side, and I'll explain how to do the other. Step 11, baste the armhole seam. The raw edges were just around the whole armhole. What I did was I folded them in around 1/2 inch. I put a little pin as a guideline. I flipped it inside out, and then I started to baste the seams, but I didn't go all the way up to the shoulder. The reason why is because if you have no opening here, you end up with a tube that you can't flip inside out. There needs to be a hole. So what I did is I left about 2 inches open on the side of the armhole, and on the side of the neckline, I opened it up around 2 inches as well. You should be able to put your finger through the lining of the shoulder and the shoulder strap. Okay, let me flip this inside out. This is what you'll kind of end up with. So as you can see, I was taking out the pins one by one and basting the seams together. And like I said, you end up kind of with this weird tube. That's why it's so important to have that opening. You see? So my next step is to sew at 1/2 inch all around this strap, which is a little, it looks tricky, but it's not actually tricky. And I'm going to leave that 2 inches of opening that I did. Step 12, sew the armhole seam at 1/2 inch seam allowance. As you're doing this, you have to make sure that you are only sewing 2 layers of fabric. There's gonna be extra layers in here because that's the other half of the strap. Notice how I have to keep pulling on this to reveal more of the strap. And now we will, well, first I'm going to remove the basting because that's not necessary anymore. I removed the basting, so I will flip it inside out. Okay, so nothing's twisted. It looks pretty good. I'm going to flip it back inside out because what I want to do is kind of cut into the seam allowance so that this lays better. I cut into it around there. I'm going to do that on the other side. Now that we have that, we are going to flip it back to the right side. Now we are going to press it on the iron. I'm pressing the lining, just like slightly rolling it to the inside. This is important before we get to the next step. Step 14, sew the shoulder opening closed by hand. So you're just gonna do a little stitch by hand and, you know, just take the smallest bit of the self fabric and then go into the lining, and you won't see anything on the face part of the fabric. Yeah, see, there's no stitches visible. Step 15, hem the dress with a baby hem. I sewed 1/4 inch all around as a guideline. I folded it, I sewed on the edge, and then folded again and sewed. Step 16, trim the lining if necessary, and then hem it with a baby hem again. So I'm doing the same exact thing as we did for the lining, and we are done. Thank you guys for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.